Welcome to Holly's Pandorium, featuring your host, psychic medium Holly Jordan.
Hello, everyone. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium, and I have with me a new guest today, and she has got the world at her fingertips. This woman does a little bit of everything, so I'm very excited to hear her paranormal stories and then hear about the things that she does. We are going to meet today Theresa Wolf Silva. She lists herself as a wise woman, a rune reader, a medium, a psychic. She does Reiki. She is a master of Reiki. She does reflexology and a tuning fork modality that I cannot wait to hear about. But most of all, she just had a birthday. So happy birthday again, Theresa.
Thank you.
And I'm so glad to have you here. And I cannot wait to hear your stories. I've heard a little bit, but I can't wait to hear more. So please tell us some of your very first experiences with the paranormal and what happened. How did that work out for you?
Well, I've been experienced since I was about 3.
Okay.
My first experience was when I was a child during my maternal grandfather's passing. I was sitting in the front room of my grandmother's house with all my aunts and my mother, and they were sobbing and sad. And I quite honestly didn't understand why, because my papa was sitting in his rocking chair still. Excuse me. So when I told them that, they were very shocked and stunned. And my grandmother told me I was never to say anything like that ever again. I was raised in a Catholic family, and her mother, my great grandmother, was a seer. Years later, my grandmother and I made up, but once she crossed over, and I have since then communicated with my great grandmother also over it. So throughout my childhood, things are never quite normal. I'd see and hear things that others didn't. My mother's, particularly if it was upsetting, and I did mention it to my mother would say, "Oh, go say a rosary and light a candle," which years later is pretty much what I tell my clients. Go light a candle and set an intention. Everything's going to be okay.
Right. Right.
So
Exactly.
that was kind of my, I did experience my absolutely first deja vu in 1963. My father was moving to Satsop, Washington. We were moving from Albany, Oregon. He had went ahead and rented a house, and we were finishing up packing in Albany. And I remember that he called and described the house to Mom, and she was very excited. And she was telling us, and I kept telling her, "I'm not moving. I don't want to move to that house." And she'd say, "Your dad's rented it. We're going to move." We did move, and the minute I walked in the house, I just was panicked. And my mother said, "Well, what's wrong?" "Well, I can tell you all the furniture's going to go." I said, "I've been here before, and I don't, with our furniture." And she just poo-pooed me. "Just go help your dad unload the truck."
Right.
Go help. So, and we did. And yes, she put all the furniture where I remembered it being in my deja vu experience. But the big kicker was, and I didn't pick that up in the deja vu until the kids had the whole upstairs of the house. It was a gigantic house. And we had 2 big bedrooms and a great play area upstairs. It was gorgeous.
Right.
And every kid's dream, we had a whole floor to ourselves. But the house also came with its own little poltergeist. Little entity I could not physically see, but he did not like me. He knew that I could sense him. And I was continually changing situations whenever we were playing upstairs to avoid him. And he used to pinch me, and he used to trip me on the stairs.
Ouch.
There was a doorway leading outside at the stairs. It was locked because it no longer was stairs outside. But his goal quite honestly, was to throw me through that door if he could figure it out.
Ooh.
Fortunately, we only lived there about 3 months, moved on to a safer house. And so that was my absolutely first deja vu. And my first experience with a little poltergeist who was vicious. Normally, I see family and friends hire spirits and guides, and even for my clients, I do. Probably another big one that changed my life was, let me see, actually, my first husband and I, we lived in Portland, Oregon, in this really old area of Southwest Portland in a hotel or an apartment house. It was a hotel made into an apartment house. It was a cute little apartment. It had this gigantic walk-in closet. And we had gotten together, and my clothes kept getting moved every day.
Oh, no.
They moved in the closet off to the side, and there was
Right.
a nice warm spot where my clothes should be. And I kept sensing something was there. I couldn't quite see it, but I could feel the energies. And and one day I was complaining to my husband. I said, I don't know what's moving my clothes, but it keeps moving my clothes and getting it disorganized. And he laughed. He said, "Oh, it's grandma. She came by. She said she wanted to check and make certain he had a good wife." I'm going, well, just tell grandma you're happy.
Right.
And a few months later, it was to my surprise, he was working late at night, and I was kind of half dazed, and the window was open in the bedroom, and all of a sudden, my closet door whips open, and out rushes grandma through the window. It was quite amazing. I
Wow.
barely saw her, but she
Right.
just went swoosh. And when my husband got home, I said, "Your grandma left today." She went through the bedroom window. And he
Right.
laughed. He said, "Yeah, she stopped by and said that you were okay."
Oh, so
So,
your husband was sensitive also?
yeah,
Yes?
my first husband was
Wow.
very sensitive to it. And in fact, that was one of the big interests between the two of us, is we could,
Sure.
we
That's
had something that
amazing.
was in common. He came from a line of druids, white druids,
Okay.
from Wales. So he had that part in him. And so I've experienced that throughout my lifetime in varying situations. I mean, I've seen my late husband, who's my second husband, his face floating, and I've seen angels and all kinds of different things. Probably one of the most recent situations was just before COVID, so about I think 2018
Mhm.
or 2019, maybe it was. I do the Pendleton Fair with a dear friend. We have a booth, or have had in the past, at a booth at the Pendleton Roundup, which is kind of a strange place to even find us.
Yeah.
But we were out walking in Pendleton one day, and I had been just feeling kind of off, half somewhere else and half in the world I would live, half in 2019 and half somewhere else. And we were walking down by the wharf area. There's an area where boats would come in, docks, and it's a park. And all of a sudden, I go, "Oh my God, there are cars and oxen drawn wagons on the same road." And I'm feeling like I'm in the 1800s, early 19s, and there's dust and cows and, sand and everything one would expect in the older age. And
Sure.
yet I could hear the cars, and I had grabbed my friend's arm and I had said, "Debbie, you need to talk to me until I'm back in the 20th century, 21st century.
Wow.
I really am in two different dimensions." So we are able to cross over at times.
Yeah.
It just kind of depends
Yes.
on what's going on,
I
you
agree.
know.
That's definitely something I can relate to. I fortunately had some training on time travel and
Uh,
going back and doing dowsing, but it was under very controlled conditions. But I can tell you that I completely relate to being in the moment, because the training that I had was specifically to a time in the Old West. And I didn't know it at the time, but the person that arranged it knew exactly what had happened in this area. And so he worked for the US Geological Survey, and he gave us maps. His daughter and myself were both in these metaphysical training classes, and he says, I want to see if you guys can do this. Long story short, we saw what looked like a movie, but we were in it. We
Right.
were in the moment, and it was incredible. So I can just fathom seeing everything at once. It would be overwhelming. So you're very fortunate you had someone right next to you to help you get through that. Wow.
Right. I didn't have the training, and it was very, very movie-like, living like
Yes.
in the moment.
Yes.
And but there was all the traffic sounds, and I knew I needed to continue to hear the traffic sounds, because there was a bit of part of me going, I wonder if I could get stuck here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Because I didn't have the training, and it was actually when I do readings for people, I a lot of times it is like a movie theater. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel, or if I'm doing a journey, I feel like I am somewhere else. You are
Sure.
somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, so in that sense, I knew that I needed to keep, one foot in the reality that I knew as this dimension of this life.
Right.
So it was interesting. That time also, I had been requested to come and do a reading at the underground museum there.
Oh, wow.
The lady's mother had passed, and she was trying to publish her mother's books, and that was interesting because it's the brothel up above, so you go through the brothel part, but
Mhm.
underground is the Chinese area where they lived during because they were not allowed above the streets,
Right.
particularly after night. And so they lived underground. And that was an interesting experience too, because I've been requested. I knew I was coming. All of a sudden, getting ready, and we're going to go there. And my legs feel like I'm hobbled. I've got something wrapped around both my ankles. I feel it, but you look down and there's nothing around your ankles. I mean, I'm
Right.
not hobbled, but
Right.
I felt hobbled, and finally I said, I don't know who's hobbling me, but I have somewhere to be. You have to stop this.
Right.
And so I went. We viewed upstairs, downstairs first, the Chinese area, and we
Mhm.
got to one area, and I go, this is where I'm hobbled at. And
Ah,
so the lady said, "Oh, they didn't lock the prisoners up, or the people, the Chinese people, in policing themselves." And I said, "Well, I hate to tell you this, but they did hobble
yeah. Yeah.
because I got hobbled this morning, and now I'm feeling the same sensation because they're wanting this to be told right now."
Yes.
So it
Yeah.
was interesting because as soon as I spoke, I felt the hobbles on my legs again. And then
Right.
I spoke, and after I explained it, the hobbles disappeared. We went upstairs and
Oh,
finished
good.
viewing the brothel area, which also was very interesting. Uh,
Right.
because then there are several of them up there that chimed in too. But
Nice.
so yes, you can experience. I would even advise anyone, go to the Portland Underground. I've been there. It's very interesting, and you
Mhm.
might be amazed what you can feel, because
Right.
those feelings are there, and not to doubt yourself.
Right.
I mean, that's probably the biggest thing, is don't doubt yourself.
Yeah, it can be overwhelming, and I think that's the number one thing is people tend to second guess very quickly. We're very self-critical, but kinda go with it. Just
Right,
let yourself feel and see, and instead of beating yourself going, "What is that? Who is it?" Just let it have, what are you seeing? What are you hearing? What are you feeling? Observe. Be an observer. Yeah.
right, and know that and be aware that there are other things out there that we really don't know everything, and
Right.
and our worlds do collide, and I wouldn't say collide, but they overlap each other.
Yes,
So
they
there
do.
are a lot of times, particularly if you lose a pet, you're going to more than likely hear their little scuttering paws all over the house the first
Yeah.
week or two, because
Right.
they're still running around. They're still checking in.
Right.
They're still there. They still loved you very much.
Right.
And they know that you're suffering from their loss. So they're there to give you comfort, as are your loved ones.
Right.
I do the mediumship and clairvoyant and psychic, and I do my readings. I love to do fairs because fairs are where you just meet someone. I love talking. And a lot of people are a little bit leery when you say,
Sure.
well, I can just tell you that without anything. So I've
Right.
brought the runes in. They are a nice, friendly tool to me. They are indigenous to my European heritage,
Right.
my bloodline. So I use that tool, and it helps relax people. They can participate visibly in their readings, which I
Mhm.
think for a lot of people is important. They
Yeah.
need to have a part in it rather than having someone just tell them what you're sensing and seeing.
Right.
Yeah. So that's why I use the runes, and they are a part of my heritage. So, why not use them?
No, you're the second person recently that shared that with me, and it's from a loving place. I know people get very uncomfortable when they think you know stuff that you have no right to know. And
Uh,
if you have a tool that allows you to get that, then it seems more tangible to the average person that's never had a psychic experience that they are aware of. Um, I think we're all psychic, and I think people dismiss psychic things constantly and just don't realize it.
oh,
You
I
know, that
agree.
I think it's a second nature. But you had some other things that happened to you that were in the paranormal realm too. You've been through a lot. You've
Yeah,
been through a
yeah.
lot.
Now my brain's going blank. Isn't it wonderful?
That's
Uh,
okay. That's okay.
But yes, I've had a lot of psychic situations come up and paranormal. Um, like I said, all of a sudden I'm blank.
That's
There,
okay.
there.
So let's talk about some of the different modalities that you have.
Okay.
So let's talk about the tuning fork thing. What is that?
Well, I'm not as proficient as my good friend is. Basically, the tuning forks is a vibrational healing modality.
Okay.
Using tuning forks in varying groupings to help heal your body, give
Okay.
you the homeostasis. So you would be using solfeggio or sonic solar spectrum in a certain grouping of them to uh, give you oxygen to your blood, or to just relax your mind so that you can think, to
Mhm.
reorganize your chakras so they're tuned in to
Okay.
the to vibrational sounding. So it's kind of that. You can do other things with it. There's several of them that are, you know, symbolize love, and you can clear food. And uh, I love my angel tuning forks. They're my favorites when I'm clearing a room. It's much faster than smudging. It just
Angel tuning forks? I have never heard of this. I am intrigued.
they're
Wow.
little tiny tuning forks. They're no bigger than, what, 3, 4 inches, and they make a very sharp sound. There's three together, and you
Mhm.
tap the three together, and they clear a room. They're wonderful for clearing crystals
Wow.
in a snap. It's not doesn't take half the time that it does to smudge a room or any of the other.
That's
It's
incredible.
really fast. It's very sharp. I like it because they're again in a surrounding when you're doing a fair. There's no, they don't want smoke, and people are
Right.
concerned with smells, and it's just fast. It clears fast,
That's
works fast.
brilliant. That's brilliant. A
Yeah.
lot of things travel with sound waves, so I
All right.
find that incredibly interesting. That's very interesting.
Right. Well, and to me too, it also it's a good way to set up a boundary. When I do my runes or any reading, I do set a protective boundary around the reading table.
That's
I
smart.
use algaes, which is one of self empowerment, self healing, self protection,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes for everyone. It basically is the peace rune. We would classify it as being upside down. However,
Okay.
however, the peace symbol is the one that's upside down.
Okay. Okay. So
If
if
I were,
someone was interested in doing this type of thing, I'm going to put this up for everyone to see. You've got a .com where people can reach you.
yeah,
And for the people that are in our listening audience, would you please spell this out phonetically so people can find you if they're interested in contacting you about some of this stuff?
well, it's www.Theresa, Theresa, Wolf, WOLF, Silva, SILVA.com.
Perfect.
My maiden
That's
name
awesome.
is Wolf, and my married name is Wolf Silva.
Gotcha. So moving on to your next modality, reflexology. What does that do and how do you use that?
Reflexology is the tuning forks. You should be present with the tuning fork. It can be
Okay.
done at a distance, but I'm not experienced enough to say how it works. That works.
Okay.
So both the reflexology and the tuning forks are hands-on.
Okay.
Reflexology is the using of your hands on your feet, face, and hands, pressure points
Mm-hmm.
to bring, using the pressure of your fingers to bring homeostasis to your body. It basically is more internally working the organs of your body through those spots than, say, massage does. I
Mm-hmm.
usually just do feet. I do feet or hands. I don't normally do face.
Okay.
Uh, but for feet and hands, so there are spots all through your hands and feet that represent organs.
Mm-hmm.
And you are going to use pressure on those spots, and you can then help alleviate and sense issues. I have done reflexology on certain clients and said, you know, your foot's awfully tight and
Mm-hmm.
crystallized. I can feel crystals. It feels like little sand in your feet
Mm-hmm.
under the skin. And I've said, you really probably should go see a doctor, as grainy and as tight as this is.
Right.
So it is a good modality to identify possible upcoming issues,
Mm-hmm.
or identify if your issue is healing too. Because
Okay.
if you've done it, you go for 3 appointments in a row, you can tell that things are improving or getting worse depending on what the situation is.
Okay.
Uh, in Europe, they use reflexology much more than we do here in the United States. There is a group of oh no, that's actually Reiki more than reflexology. But the same group, both Reiki and reflexology are used far more in Europe in a more medical situation than over here in the United States.
I have a situation when I was pregnant with one of my kids where I kept having Braxton Hicks and they were becoming tiresome. And so this very lovely nurse
Oh, yeah.
grabbed my feet and she pinched my baby toenails and said, "We're going to stop this right now." And I said, "What are we doing?"
Yeah.
And she said, "This is reflexology." And by gosh, within less than 3 minutes, my cramping and my contractions stopped. I felt better and I was finally able to get some sleep. That was my first introduction to
Yeah.
reflexology, so I am a fan.
Oh,
And I've had a little bit of training in it over the years. I think it's fascinating, and I've actually been a technician of pedicures in the past, and so I understand there's so much in the human foot that
oh,
is connected to everywhere else, and so getting work done on your feet and your hands to me is a huge blessing because it all stops somewhere. That's the ending spot. Our hands and our feet have all these receptors and all these nerve endings. And it really does make sense when you look at the charts about how things are interconnected. Things build up in our feet. That's kind of the dead spot. If you don't really get that massaged once in a while and work things out, a lot can build up in your feet that's really not healthy,
Right.
I guess is a good way to say it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's lovely. I
Right.
think that's great that you participate in that. And then as far as the Reiki stuff, tell us about your training. I was very curious about that.
Well, I'm a master Reiki, Usui heritage line. Reiki is an interesting thing, and I'm certain there's going to be some Reiki person that disagrees with me.
That's
Once
okay.
you start Reiki and you learn your modality or the heritage line you're working in, I then went on and attended many other different forms of Reiki and energy healing.
Mhm.
And I think at some point you hit that spot where, yes, I've done Usui Reiki, and that's what I can teach as a master and would teach as a master. But in reality, I now classify my Reiki as unique to me
Mhm.
because I've changed it to meet what I sense is my way of doing the Reiki. And I
Okay.
think once you've learned Reiki, you you can't not do Reiki. For example, when I do reflexology, there are times when it's not just reflexology. I am sending Reiki too.
Okay.
Um, or in sometimes when you're mentioning somebody, when I'm holding space for someone, it's not necessarily something that I'm intentionally doing, but I know I'm sending Reiki.
Okay.
And even in my first Reiki class, it was fun. You're sitting in class and you've got all this new, you're excited and energy and all of that. And the teacher says, well, now bring your hands together and rub them together and pull them apart and feel the energy ball in between your hands. That's Reiki, she says, but we're going to bring it from the universe, not from our own hands. And I'm going, uh, this is Reiki? You're certain about it? She said, well, yes. I said, well, I've been doing this since I was 5
Mhm. Yeah.
because my parents lived on a dairy farm. They both worked in the barns at 4 in the morning. Bedtime was at 6 p.m. after dinner at 5.
Sure.
And us girls had the biggest room, and we had a double bed. All 3 of us slept in. Um, this was in the 50s, so this is normal.
Mhm.
And we could sit on the bed and talk quietly or play quietly, but
Mhm.
we were not allowed off of the bed
Right.
because we were supposed to be going to sleep. We we also lived so high up in the mountains in Idaho
Mhm.
that we were not allowed to go outside to the outhouse, which is where the bathroom was, after dark because of the cougars
Okay.
and wild animals. So we had chamber pots and couldn't leave the bedroom, and it was the norm. It was for
Right.
us. So
Right.
us kids somehow all on our own discovered Reiki energy.
Interesting.
We would make balls and sit on 3 corners in a triangle and throw the balls at each other and have
Fun.
fun and do energy work. And I to this day, I don't know how or why the 3 of us discovered it. It was just something we could do quietly.
Mhm.
And and to us, it was very warm and comforting because there's a
Right.
certain, the energy work is just, to me, oh, you just kind of drift off into Neverland and energy work. At least I do.
Right.
So, yeah, at some point, your Reiki becomes yours and it becomes part of your just normal body. Here in the United States, particularly on the East Coast, medical Reiki is trying to become part of the hospital
Mhm.
regime, which I certainly hope it does. I think it needs to. I have done some Reiki at Providence Hospital in their recovery room, but mostly indirectly from their patient's room because they do not allow Reiki practitioners in the surgeries and whatnot.
Okay.
But I think there's a place for it. It is definitely something, you know.
And it definitely is one of those modalities. I think people, because it's newer here in the United States and its awareness of it, I think people assume it's a new age thing that just happened. It's very old. It's
It,
very old.
yes, and actually, it started in was it San Francisco? I think it was San Francisco. It was California in the 1970s when Usui Reiki did come to the United States. It
Mhm.
was taught to housewives as a way to relax.
Mhm.
And it was the new age thing of the 70s. So it had its place, but it's been around a long time. And I think it all of my modalities are pretty much energy and vibration, because even the mediumship and runes, it all is based on vibration. I think the list doesn't show animal communication. I do animal communication.
That's
Um,
wonderful.
there again. Well, now there's a paranormal one you would enjoy. Just
Okay,
kidding.
let's hear it.
I used to raise donkeys, and I had this one donkey that underwent a horrible accident in the barn. He had rolled and gotten his hoof caught, and we were all in bed when it happened. And when I went to tend to him in the morning and get him out, I realized he had really injured himself badly by getting his hoof caught on the stall. He had been rolling and rolling, and I don't know how he managed
Ow.
to do what he did, but he did it. I ended up calling the veterinarian, and she came, and we were very concerned that he was having difficulty standing and whatnot. But to make a long story short, he did not survive.
Okay.
But we worked really hard for about 3 days, and
Okay.
finally, um, he passed on his own. And his mate, I left him in the barn, and his mate came and brought hay and covered him in hay.
Oh,
It was just
that's sweet.
heart-rending,
Oh, sure.
because it was they were buddies. And
Yeah.
then no more than a few days later, I'm cooking spaghetti in my kitchen, and I turn around, and I am face to face with that donkey.
Oh,
I'm
in the
going,
kitchen?
"You're not supposed to be in the kitchen."
Oh, funny.
And he looked at me as if to say, "I can go anywhere I like now." It was just such a shock to turn around and see my donkey just standing there, and I'm trying to make spaghetti. It's like, I don't believe this. So they do, there again, the animals will come, and they do want you to know, you know, that they loved you and they're part of your family, and
Right.
they're there. But yes, I've had that paranormal experience
I
also.
love that. That is awesome. I love that. That's too fun.
Yeah.
Have you ever had pets that have passed on come back and visit you?
Oh my, yes. In fact, my house a lot of times has extra pets. I
Yeah.
had a teacup poodle that weighed a whopping 4 pounds, was the
Little.
absolute love of my life.
Okay.
And when I'd let them out in the yard, they'd all just trot out, my living ones would trot out. And I'd count them as they come in to make certain everybody gets in. And his name was Pierre. And every time he had passed, and he used to come and sit with me and whatnot, and I would let everybody out that was living still, and then I'd count them as they come in. Well, Pierre would come in with them just like he used to when he was alive, and I'd
Mhm.
invariably end up leaving somebody outside
Oh, whoops.
because I'd count him too as he came in.
Oh,
And
funny.
finally I said, "Pierre, this is not safe for your housemates. You need to come in on the left side or on my right side, because they come in on my left side. I will
Right.
count you, but you need to come in
That's
on an
funny.
opposite side." And after that, he did for quite some time. I haven't seen him in a while. I've mentioned him now, so I'm certain I will see him tonight.
Right, of course.
you know. So yes,
That's very
I
great.
do have quite a menagerie that can and do show up. Um, I did reflexology once on this one lady who rescued horses,
Mhm,
and she liked to use essential oils with her horses. So I used to bring essential oils to her for her horses.
mhm,
And one day she says to me, "What do you see in my house?" I said, "Well, I was going to tell you, you have about 6 horses in here."
mhm,
And so they do come, they come and visit. And particularly if you're thinking of something or
mhm,
you feel something, particularly on your bed, if
mhm.
you're used to sleeping with a pet of some sort, a cat or a dog, and there's a pressure spot on your bed, I would
Mm.
bet anything it's your pet.
Yeah,
To just let you know. I've
yeah.
got another one. Oh, this is a good one.
Okay, let's hear it.
Now that we're mentioning animals, I
Right.
had a friend, my daughter's friend, was babysitting somebody else's animal, and the animal got out and was lost, and they couldn't find it. And the parent of the dog, the human of the dog, wanted to know what was going on. And of course, the person who was supposed to be taking care of it was in an absolute tizzy. Could I locate the dog?
Mhm,
So I talked and I found the dog. And I said, "You need to go. We need to find you. You're lost." Well, he told me he wasn't lost. He went on a walkabout. I said, "You can't go on a walkabout. You're very, very old and you're not getting your medicine, and your human mommy is going to be upset.
yes.
We need to get you back to where you need to be." No, no,
Mm,
no. He was on a walkabout. They well, describe to me where you're at. So he'd tell me where he's at. And then I'd call and say, "Go check here. He's there."
mhm.
They'd get there and he would have gone, and I'd contact him again. "You left. You said you were going to stay." He said, "No, I'm on a walkabout." But he'd always leave enough clues there. And my descriptions were so vivid, and so were his descriptions,
Mhm.
that we were always just one step behind him.
Okay.
One horrible stormy night, couldn't get through to him. It was just a horrible night. They couldn't send people out to look.
Mhm.
And I called and called, mentally called to him. And finally, the next morning, it's wet. It's just been a blistering day here. And I said, "Where are you?" But he's happy. He's young looking. He's vibrant. He's running around. I'm going, "Where are you?"
Mhm.
He says, "I don't know, but this is the greatest place. It's
Oh, boy.
warm, it's sunny, there's
Mhm.
balls." And then he described some of his other mates that he had had when he was younger, who were
Oh,
older
boy.
than him. I said, "Oh, can you tell me where your body is?" He says, "Well, no, that's just a puddle. It's just a puddle of white." I go, "A puddle of white? What do you mean?" The dog was white. And there
Okay.
he shows me up against an oak tree, a little, his little body all crumpled up. It's
Oh,
sopping wet. He'd obviously passed in the evening.
sure.
He was just in this puddle of water. Said-
Aw.
And I said, "Well, where is it?" And he tells me, well, the people never did find his body. They kind of don't
Oh.
know where it was,
Sure, sure.
but it was the most interesting 3 days because this dog
I
just kept
bet.
insisting he was on a walk around. He wasn't going to tell me how to find him exactly.
Aw.
And so he
Y
would just tell me where he was leaving. And like I said, every time I would get there, the people would get there and say, "Well, yeah, we could see he made a bed here.
right.
Yeah, there's white fur here."
Mhm.
Doggone it, what are
Yeah,
you doing? So
right.
that was a fun adventure. Sad ending, but it
Yes,
was,
that ending, definitely.
but well, sad for the humans, happy for him. He was very, very ill. And so
Oh,
for him, it was time to move along.
sure,
But
sure.
it was a fun reading. It was,
Sounds like an adventure
it
more.
was, it was.
That's amazing. So I am curious about how you began, how you got introduced or started doing rune reading. How did that come about for you?
Well, it kind of is a stage situation. I read about it in the 70s, but
Okay.
that was the time of my first marriage, and we were having kids and doing the young mom thing. And And then I went to college and became into corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And between corporate America, raising kids, a divorce, a remarriage, there just wasn't time for rooms.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the empty nester began and whatnot, I just picked it up again
Mm-hmm.
and did more reading about it. And then my friend and we were walking around the Body, Mind, Spirit in
Mm-hmm.
Portland, Oregon, and we ran into a gentleman from England,
Mm-hmm.
from the UK, from Glastonbury, who were doing runes, and he offered classes, and I thought, why not?
Right.
So I had already been working with runes and had several sets. And so he was my first mentor. And
Okay.
then I went and took a class from Ingrid, the rune woman there in Portland.
I
Great
know Ingrid.
classes.
Yeah.
I love
She's awesome.
Ingrid.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was my second mentor. And
Mm-hmm.
right now I'm taking classes again from a gentleman in the UK, Glastonbury, Tim Raven,
Mm-hmm.
who is putting this shaman spin on the runes. So leaving more of the readings to more of a healing aspect of the runes that would have been used more in Europe and whatnot. Because
Okay.
the runes, there again, the runes have quite a history of their own. They
Mm-hmm.
believe that they actually come possibly from the Phoenician language
Mm.
as their base. However, they are written of in 300 BC in some Roman uh, articles about
Yes.
seeing them used in Europe, in
Right.
the Germanic areas. Um, we know that they were used for navigation. There are poetries, the Eddas are written about the runes in the runes. Um, my first mentor teacher, Jeremy, admits that he used the runes as a child in school to pass notes to his buddies who also know the runes
Oh, funny.
because you can write with them.
That's
Words
amazing.
actually
I have
work.
never heard of. I mean, here in America, we're lazy. We just use paper and pencil.
But that's what
Can
he.
you imagine trying to do that in class quietly? That's
No, actually, the runes are a written language, written letters
Oh,
too.
sure. But I
And
mean, that's just funny. I love that.
so he was using pencil and paper, but
Oh,
only
he was. Okay, gotcha. I
instead of writing
misunderstood.
in English, he would write
Uh,
the runic symbols to make the words.
I see.
So
Okay, that
it was
makes more
kind of
sense.
code. It's kind of like code,
Right. That's
you
very
know.
yeah, it's
So
kid code in
kid
runes.
code.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very cute. I love that. So, you basically told us that in the beginning, your first experience was really a mediumship type situation where you saw a relative that had passed on.
Right.
So, when in your life did you feel like I must be a psychic or I must be a medium? When did that finally occur to you that that's something that was part of your life? Because clearly you've been attracted to and part of energy work throughout your life, it sounds like.
Right. I have. Actually, I don't know that I ever thought I was a medium until my second husband passed. And then
Mhm.
it was given a word. Up until then, as a child experiencing it, my siblings laughed about me. There were times driving up the gorge, I needed to be asleep by a certain spot in the gorge, or I would hear a woman calling me from the Columbia River. She had passed in the river and she wanted to talk.
Mm.
Years later, working with another psychic, it came to be I was hearing another another occurrence of myself who had drowned in the Columbia River.
Oh, wow.
And once I was able to identify that, oh, well, that was just me trying to talk to me, I was
Funny.
able to. But as a kid, I knew, and my siblings used to tease me, you better be asleep soon, Teresa. You've got to get asleep. Because they would know that I would be
Oh,
agitated and upset. So I was teased a lot by my siblings. I didn't necessarily tell anyone outside of my siblings, but if something did come up, I would go to my mom. And like I said, she would say a rosary, light a candle, you'll be fine.
mm.
Okay, mom. Which is funny. I mean, even as an adult, I used to call mom and say, Mom, would you light a bunch of candles and say a prayers for me? I've got this happening right now,
Right.
because that was how we were raised. And she actually seemed to always have the ear of God. If she wanted something, you asked mom to do the praying.
Mhm.
So that was part of that. But when my second husband passed, we were very close, very, very close soulmates, possibly even twin flames, but definitely very close soulmates.
Mhm.
And I did several past life things and knew our connections and whatnot. But when he passed in 2010, he was one of 6 family deaths that year. So by the time he passed, he was amongst the last. We had already had 4 family deaths that year.
Mhm.
And when he passed, I stood in my backyard and I just screamed to the
Mm.
heavens, I know this is a lie. I know that I can communicate across
Mhm.
the barrier.
Right.
And I did tell my late husband, I said, you have 30 days, buddy, to figure out how to communicate with me. I'm coming over there and I'm bringing you back here. I was told in no terms that that was not a possibility.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But I also then
Oh.
during that time, I did some reading, I did some journeying, I did some meditation. A friend went to a psychic in Portland, got a tape recording. She was so tickled because she had gone for herself, but she had asked about my late husband, and the entire tape recording were all clue messages from him.
Nice.
So I knew immediately, this he had finally, and it was funny, it was 30 days after his passing.
Oh,
He
funny.
had found a way. And to this day, he does things that, and I know that it's him. And, so at that point is when I finally came out. My, the last passing in our family in 2010 was a younger sister's only son was in a horrible uh, accident at work
Oh
and
my.
died immediately within just seconds of the accident.
Oh, goodness.
And so a few months later, I told my family I wanted to meet with them and talk about something. And they knew at that time I was already kind of come out and said, you guys, no more teasing. This is the reality. So I did that and I learned how to do automatic writing. So I told my sister that her son had written a letter with me, automatic writing letter with
Mhm.
me. I would bring it with me and read it to her because it's kind of hard to read.
Mhm.
And and she went to church, of course. Talked to the
Okay.
talked to the priest to make certain I wasn't speaking to the devil or
Oh, wow.
doing everything evil. And the priest had pretty much, gave me the high sign. I was okay. I wasn't working with the devil.
Mhm.
So I did, you know, we did have a great big meeting, and I just officially said, I do this, and I always have.
Right.
And this is I see things, and here's an automatic letter. I read it to my sister. She cried through the whole thing because my nephew was very, very definite at giving all the cues. When you're working with somebody who's passed, as you know, they give clues to the person that you're talking to,
They
so
do.
that
They do.
that person knows that it's the right person talking.
Right.
And then I just said, now you guys, I'm out of the closet. I'm a medium. And better yet, I may even be a little bit of a witch because I do herbs
Right.
and whatnot. But I am a medium, a psychic. And my brother goes to me and he says, my God, we've been waiting for you to just come out of the closet for ages.
Really?
And I said, what do you mean? He says, well, do you remember the house? I said, don't tell me the Satsap house. He said, yes, ma'am. I can see them too. That's why I used to go to bed with my cap gun because you girls all had one big room. I was the only
Oh.
boy in my room, and
Mm.
I was the target at night.
Oh,
after we
wow.
went to bed. And I said, "Well, why didn't you say something?" Well, he just said, "You were the one that was doing it, so we just left you do it." And then the conversation went on. My sister, whose son passed, sees angels. Uh, Another sister who was probably the most psychic of us all was in a horrible horse riding accident and does not see or sense anymore, but she used to as a child. I knew that.
Mhm.
So it was like, okay, guys, all my childhood, you laughed at me. This is not fair. Um, so I think it does run in families too, you
Oh,
know.
sure. Yeah.
And I didn't give it a name until, like I said, I was 60 years old when I finally gave it a name. Up until
Yeah.
then, it was just, I would say my daughter used to tell her friends, don't don't try to tell mom anything. She'll know.
Yeah.
Don't tell mom anything. She'll know. Don't try to hide it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so for them, I just say, I just know things. I'm just a mom. Moms know things.
Yes.
You know, um, there just wasn't words for it, so I didn't
Yeah.
give it words.
Well, and that's honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast is because depending on the generation that you're from, most people, many people did not have a support system growing up with these life altering systems, I guess. I'm not sure what to even quantify them as. Um, I would call them skills, but I would just say they're part of who we are. It's hard to explain them. And but they're as real as putting your socks on your feet and putting your shoe and on. It's very normal. It's very regular. There's nothing crazy about it. It's just part of how your mind works.
Right,
And our brains are kind of fantastic. They do incredible things. Um, I am so excited that you kind of expanded your world and went off into all these modalities because clearly you've got some healing psychic stuff going on, because if you're
right,
drawn to that, that's I feel like that's how you kind of know. I mean, people wonder, well, what kind of a psychic am I? Well, what are you drawn to? What do you love? What do you feel very close to or what fascinates you? And that's where you kind of find your heart and you'll see where you excel because things will just come to you naturally. Definitely.
right. Well, and yes, I do the healing part of it. To me, when I do a reading, my I set intentions when
Mhm,
before I ever start a reading.
mhm,
I bring in the angels and my guides and their guides and family members or whoever's wanting, as long as for positive and for the healing of that person's soul.
right.
I think one of the most interesting readings I ever did was I was in Salem at a fair, and these two older ladies came. They were sisters. They were the cutest little sisters. They lived together, and they were older in their late 60s, early 60s. And they wanted a rune reading, and they'd never seen runes before. They were from European heritage, and they wanted a rune reading. And could I do it together? And of course, sure, we'll figure this out. But I was thinking, this isn't what they're supposed to have, but it's fine. They want a rune reading. I'll do a rune reading.
Mhm,
So they come up with their intention they're interested in, which is way off from what ends up. The rune reading comes up. I'm seeing an older gentleman wanting to talk to them, and all of it said, and all of a sudden, I just put the scarf over my runes and said, "No, what happened to you when you were 6 years old?" Both sisters looked at each other. They just were stunned. And then it was like this absolutely wonderful experience. I got to be the interpreter between the other side, their father,
okay,
and their side, them alive. And they had been in an abuse situation at 6 with their father. And it
okay,
was the most healing experience. I even felt healed from it. The girls, the ladies, like I'm saying, they're in their 60s. This
Right.
happened decades ago.
Right.
And
Right.
they for the first time in their lives talked to each other about it, and they
Wow.
talked to their father on the other side about it. And
Hmm.
I just got to be there going, yes. And they would say, well, did he really say that? Because they were even feeling what he was saying
Okay.
and his sorrow at it because he realized that he'd been damaging them, and when you go on the
Sure.
other side, you do heal yourself. You
Yes.
aren't as functional here, and then when you go, you can and do heal yourself, but it can be
Right.
a long process.
Yes.
But it was one of my most favorite readings was because I just was kind of like the moderator.
Right.
Yes, your dad did say that. No, he wants to have you clarify this statement, you know. And so
Mhm.
it was the most interesting, and I felt one of the most healing experiences I have had
Yeah.
with my clients because there again, a lot of times the healing is not just for your client, it is for you too.
Yeah.
Because there's some aspect of it that may touch your body or your soul.
Right.
I just was at Rosani, and I like to give one rune readings. I have um, a little pot there with runes in it. You get to choose a single rune, and I will tell you for that day what that rune symbolizes or what I'm sensing. And
Mhm.
it was an interesting 2 days because I kept giving the same answer, going, well, now there's obviously something in general that the world needs to know, but also in general for me to know.
Right.
So I just sometimes just doing a single rune or a single thought, a, a meditation that comes to mind,
Mhm.
you know, sometimes we all could do this. It's not that we can't. There are just some of us that listen better or are a little bit different tunes, so we hear it a little bit more.
Right.
Because I'll be talking with somebody and totally I shut my psychic part down. I set boundaries on myself saying, no, I'm
Mhm.
not reading or I'm not. And
Mhm.
sometimes even though I have said I'm in a situation I'm not reading, I will blurt something out that is not what I would normally say, but I know very well it comes from the other side.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
oh, that isn't supposed to fall out of my mouth.
Well, no, but I understand because I've had to learn to temper myself because there's times that the other side is very blunt and very demanding. They
Right.
want to be heard and they want to be heard now. And sometimes there's just not an easy way to do that.
Right.
It comes
Sometimes
out very clumsy sometimes, but it
right.
usually, at least for me so far, I found that it has positive endings.
Right.
And
Well, it's
but it
something
does
that needs
put
to
you
be
in an
said.
awkward spot. Yeah, it can be very awkward to be the deliverer, to be the message deliverer because
Right.
people aren't anticipating that you're gonna know anything. That's why I'm always jarred when I see psychics walk up to people on the street. I don't do that
Yeah, I don't
unless
do
I
that.
am absolutely positively sure that my guides are like, "This is an urgent matter. You have to share this information." Otherwise, I wouldn't dare. I only go where I'm requested. I only listen or do things when I'm asked. I do not invade people's privacy. I do not
No, you
because
can't
it's
do
not what that's for. It's
no.
just for healing and just for helping people sort out their lives, and that's it.
Right.
Nothing
And
else.
it's needing that one piece, even when you're doing forensic type mediumship, which I have done some.
Mhm.
It is not necessary. It's not necessary. The ones that I've done have been after the fact and after the body's found, and. So it's more the family wanting some information, more information than what they've gotten. And that's for healing. It's not only healing of the family member left behind, it's healing of the family member that has passed. But
Right.
sometimes it's so long after the passing that I've my heart goes out a little bit to the families because all of a sudden they're talking to their loved one on the other side who's passed after a horrendous uh, life life taking
Right.
situation, and maybe it's been 6 years, and the family's still struggling with this.
Oh, yeah.
And the person over there has managed to heal.
Right.
And I have had a few clients that just were very upset that their family member was still not mad and upset and wanting vengeance. And I think they've healed.
Yeah,
They
they've moved
have.
on. And that's a tough concept when people being on the other side. I had a near-death experience, so I
Oh,
very much understand the light that you're in when you go and the love that you're surrounded with, and it's all encompassing. You feel completely surrounded with love and joy, and there isn't space for anger and resentment and hate. It doesn't go there. It
right.
just doesn't fit.
Right. Well, there
And
is
so,
confusion, particularly
well,
accidents
sure.
and oops is when you've accidentally killed yourself, which can happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know? But yeah, there is the confusion that is there at first, but they're
Sure.
really not. Yeah, there's not the anger, not the well, I'd like revenge. In
Right. Yeah.
fact, I did have one where it was a college, it was a college murder, um, made to look like a suicide.
Mm,
And the mother was very upset because the son kept saying, "You need to take care of yourself now. It's been 6 years. You're not
right.
taking care of yourself, Mom."
Right.
I'm fine. I am where I'm at. No, I'm not upset. No,
Right.
I've come to reality, and he was in his own way visiting family members and helping the younger
Sure.
generation in the family, the cousins and stuff, some of the younger kids that were having some problems. And he
Right.
was able to address some of the needs that they had by just being
Mhm.
a witness on the other side.
Sure.
So it is an interesting situation. I mean, even in my own family, a sister-in-law uh, brother was murdered, and it was a year's worth of dredging. The family dredged the river for a year until they found him.
Oh my goodness.
And it was horrible, but
Yeah, I bet.
eventually he did come and I did a reading for them and they had even seen him. Both my sister-in-law and brother saw him. He used to come and visit their children who are now adults when they were
Mhm.
babies, and they would see him sitting with them, you
Oh,
know.
wow. Yeah.
And so young kids, we can do this. Young kids
Oh,
do it
yeah.
all the time.
Yep.
Uh, you know. So, but he was never, even when I did readings with him, he was never revengeful or anything.
Right. Right.
No, he
That's
no.
amazing. I sure appreciate all of your sharing that you've done today. It has been absolutely incredible, Theresa. Thank you so much. And again, if anyone's interested in finding out more about the services that she offers, contact her at www.teresawolfsilva, altogether no spaces.com.
Right.
She's here in Washington and she can be reached on that .com anytime. Just leave her a message. And I want to thank you again for coming today. It's been a
Thank you.
lovely time chatting with you and getting to know you better. And it's been great to hear your stories. This is Holly saying, please hit the like button and subscribe so other people can hear this content that like this sort of thing. I appreciate your listening and watching today. And I hope to see you and hear you again soon. This is Holly from Holly's Pandorium saying, have a great night and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.